Most people think the deadliest weapon on the Eastern Front was artillery, tanks, or rifles. They're wrong. The actual killer was something far quieter, far more patient, and infinitely more ruthless. It was the cold, a cold so devastating that it claimed more soldiers than every battle combined, erased entire units overnight, and turned the world's largest armies into helpless victims of simple physics. But here's what changed everything. A group of freezing soldiers discovered an ancient technique that could triple the warmth inside their shelters. A trick so powerful that it still works today. And if you understand it, you'll never look at survival the same way again. Whether you're facing a winter power outage, preparing for an emergency, or just curious about how heat actually works, this story will transform your understanding of warmth itself. Before we go deeper into this incredible story, please hit that subscribe button, like this video, and drop a comment telling me what surprised you most. Let's get into it. The Eastern Front wasn't just cold. It was a place where temperature became a strategic weapon that nobody could defend against. Soldiers arrived with equipment designed for normal winters, only to discover that nothing had prepared them for what awaited them beneath the frozen earth. Frostbite removed men from combat faster than artillery wounds. Hypothermia claimed soldiers as they slept in shelters that should have saved their lives. Pneumonia spread like a silent plague through units already weakened by nights spent shivering on frozen ground. From 1941 onward, cold became the undefeated general of the Eastern Front. The numbers tell a story that history textbooks almost never mention. While we remember the battles, we forget the silent war happening every single night inside those trenches. Thousands of soldiers weren't dying from enemy action. They were being systematically killed by a force they couldn't see and couldn't fight. But the truly uncomfortable truth is this. Cold didn't simply weaken armies. It erased them quietly, invisibly, without firing a single shot. And once you understand what caused this catastrophe, everything changes about how you think of winter survival. The soldiers built what they thought were solid shelters. Dugouts carved quickly into earth. Bunkers reinforced with logs and scrap timber. These structures looked protective enough, but they shared one fatal flaw that no amount of blankets, firewood or body heat could overcome. They were built directly against frozen earth. And frozen earth isn't just cold. It's a massive thermal battery that relentlessly pulls warmth out of anything it touches. Here's the physics that killed them. Heat always flows from warm objects to cold objects. It's not optional. It's not negotiable. It's a law of nature. During those winters, the ground was the coldest thing for hundreds of miles around. Every soldier, every fire, and every breath simply fed its hunger. A soldier could sit beside a small stove and still feel the heat drain through the walls the moment it rose. When timber walls or log supports pressed directly against frozen ground, the physics became merciless. That shelter wasn't protecting them. It was extracting their heat. It became, in effect, a giant heat sink, far more efficient than any stove they could ever build inside. The cruelest part was that the colder the ground became, the faster it pulled heat away. This is why so many soldiers woke up colder than when they fell asleep. It wasn't just the air temperature, it was the earth beneath them and around them. The very structure meant to keep them alive was quietly killing them. And unless we understand this principle today, we repeat the exact same mistakes. Whether you're in a powerless home during a blizzard or in a makeshift shelter on a camping trip gone wrong, this principle remains true. Heat must be separated from frozen mass, or the frozen mass will take it. Faced with this invisible enemy, soldiers did exactly what most of us would do today. They stuffed every gap with whatever they could find. Straw crammed between logs, pine branches layered against walls, spare clothing and worn blankets hammered into crevices in a desperate attempt to keep warmth inside. And at first these makeshift fixes felt promising. The walls looked fuller, the air seemed slightly warmer. But within hours, or at best a few days, everything failed. The straw settled, the branches sagged, the clothing shifted under its own weight, and the moment these materials moved, gaps formed. Those gaps allowed air to circulate, and circulating air is the enemy of warmth. Here's the part most people misunderstand completely. Insulation doesn't fail because it's thin. It fails because air inside it is free to move. The moment air can circulate, it becomes a conveyor belt for heat loss. Warm air rises. Cold air sinks, and a miniature weather system begins forming inside your wall. Even a small gap becomes a highway that shuttles precious heat straight into the frozen earth behind it. This is why packed straw huts, loose hay bedding, or stacks of clothing often feel warm at first, but grow icy as the night deepens. The material itself isn't the problem. It's the movement of air inside the material, and until that movement is stopped, no amount of extra layers will save you. The soldiers who endured the worst winters learned this the hard way. They discovered that more insulation, if loose, shifting or uneven, only creates a false sense of security. What they needed was not thickness, but stillness. Not bulk, but density. Not more material, but control over the air inside it. And that single realization would lead them to one of the most powerful survival breakthroughs ever rediscovered in modern warfare. A technique so effective that it could triple the usable heat inside a shelter when everything else had failed. But to understand that breakthrough, we have to go back centuries across entire continents to the nomadic cultures of Central Asia. These were people who lived closer to raw nature than any modern society. They slept under open skies, built shelters without nails or fasteners, and faced winters that made European cold seem, well, mild by comparison. Their answer to the cold was felt. Not cloth, not canvas. Felt. Felt wasn't woven on a loom or sewn with thread. It was born from friction, moisture, and time. From trampling wool underfoot, from rolling it inside mats, from forcing fibres to bind so tightly that they became one single immovable surface. The result was astonishingly durable and astonishingly warm. Entire yurts were wrapped in felt. Soldiers in ancient armies marched in felt boots so thick that snow never penetrated them. In Russia, Valeni boots became legendary, solid cylinders of felted wool that kept feet warm at temperatures where leather froze like glass. Now imagine this ancient wisdom reappearing not in peaceful steppes, but in the chaos of the Eastern Front. These soldiers didn't have looms, they didn't have artisans, they had only wool blankets, torn uniforms, saddle pads and sacks. They soaked them in water, trampled them under boots, rolled them with logs and pressed them beneath timbers. And in the cruelest twist of nature, even the freezing nights helped them. Wet fibre bundles left outside hardened into ice, and as the ice expanded, it pushed fibres into one another. When those bundles were warm near a stove the next morning, the ice melted away, leaving behind something entirely new, a dense, stiff, windproof felt panel. For the first time, the cold stopped moving through the walls. Felt doesn't create warmth. It creates stillness, and stillness preserves heat. Inside felt millions of microscopic air pockets lock in place, frozen like tiny bubbles in stone. Warmth enters these pockets and cannot escape. Cold air stays out. And because the fibres are so densely matted, air cannot circulate inside them. There are no drafts, no microcurrents, no hidden channels that carry your heat away. Once soldiers understood that density, not quantity, was the key to survival, the next breakthrough emerged almost naturally. Felt alone was powerful, but when combined with the proper wall system, it became transformative. What they built in those frozen dugouts wasn't just insulation. It was a complete thermal engine assembled from nothing but scavenged materials and the logic of survival. The system began with the outermost layer, the earth or log wall. This wall was brutally cold, always in contact with frozen ground, always trying to pull heat inward. The soldiers simply accepted it as the first boundary. They wouldn't warm it. They would isolate themselves from it. Next came the dense felt panel, thick, stiff, and completely immovable. It performed two roles at once. It blocked conductive heat loss, and it immobilized air so completely that convection was nearly eliminated. Warm air could enter the felt, but it could not travel. Cold air could push against it, but it could not pass. Then came the narrow, dead air gap. This was the most subtle but most brilliant part of the system. This wasn't an empty space. It was a controlled space, a tiny sealed pocket where air could not circulate. The soldiers may not have known the physics behind double-pane windows or modern thermal envelopes, but they had stumbled onto the same principle. A thin, motionless layer of air is one of the most effective insulators in existence. Finally, they added an inner protective skin. Scrapboards, cardboard, planking from ration crates, anything that could shield the felt from moisture, frost, and the constant abrasion of daily life. This inner layer created a stable interior wall, dry and warm to the touch, even when the outside world was trying to freeze it solid. When all four layers worked together, something almost miraculous happened. Temperatures inside these makeshift shelters rose by 15 to 20 degrees Fahrenheit, sometimes even more when a small stove was burning. But the true victory wasn't the peak temperature. It was the stability. Instead of rapid heat loss, the moment the fire dimmed, warmth lingered. Heat stayed. The shelter stopped acting like a drain and began behaving like a vessel. This is what tripling the heat truly meant, not creating more fire, but slowing its escape. Survival didn't depend on producing warmth. It depended on preserving it. But even with the perfect wall system, soldiers confronted another enemy, one even quieter than cold and far more deceptive: moisture. To anyone who has slept outdoors in winter, moisture is the ghost in the dark. You don't see it, you barely feel it, but it destroys everything. On the Eastern Front, condensation formed the moment warm breath hit cold surfaces. Walls glittered with frost before dawn. Blankets stiffened into icy shells. Felt panels absorbed water from the ground, the air, even from soldiers' own bodies. And once insulation became wet, it ceased to protect. Wet fibres conduct heat like a bridge of pure steel. Wet insulation becomes a highway that carries warmth straight into the frozen soil. The soldiers learned this the hard way. Nights that should have been merely uncomfortable turned deadly because their insulation was damp. Fires that once warmed the shelter now only fed steam into the air. This led to a life-or-death realization. Insulation does not fail when it is thin. It fails when it is wet. The moisture barrier must always be on the warm side. Placing it on the cold side traps moisture inside the insulation, destroying it. Placing it on the warm side keeps moisture out, preserving the air pockets that make insulation work. With this principle, soldiers began lining felt panels with canvas, ponchos and bark sheets, anything that could stop condensation from soaking the fibres. When the war ended, the world moved on, and the lessons learned in frozen trenches began to fade. The generation that once slept in dugouts now lived in homes with central heating. Thermostats replaced fire. Forced air furnaces replaced stoves. But convenience has a price. Because when a home depends entirely on electricity, it is no longer a shelter. It is a machine. And when the machine stops, the house stops protecting you. In 2021, the Texas freeze turned thousands of houses into refrigerators. The moment the grid failed, indoor temperatures plunged below freezing within hours. Walls provided no thermal resistance. Insulation absorbed moisture and collapsed. People burned furniture to stay alive. The Midwest and Great Plains suffer similar outages every winter, where storms knock out power and families watch their breath frost in their own living rooms. Modern buildings are warm only when the grid works. When it doesn't, they behave like dugouts on the Eastern Front, except without the clever systems that freezing soldiers discovered under fire. But here's the good news. To reclaim this lost wisdom, you don't need to dig a trench or wrap your walls in felted blankets. You need to understand the three principles: density, dryness, and sealed layers. Once you grasp this, you can apply it anywhere. Take a basement. Concrete behaves exactly like frozen earth. But add a dense layer, create a small air gap, and protect it with an inner skin. The temperature changes dramatically. Or consider emergency situations where the grid fails and you need to create a micro-shelter inside a larger structure. Same principle, same result. The real legacy of the Eastern Front isn't a trick or a technique. It's a mindset that understands how heat actually behaves, that knows warmth is negotiation with nature, not a given. That recognizes a shelter must be designed, not merely built. In a world growing more uncertain, where winter storms cut power grids and temperatures swing violently, that knowledge still matters. If this story changed how you think about survival and warmth, please hit that subscribe button right now. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Drop a comment telling me what surprised you most about how the soldiers survived. This knowledge kept people alive in one of history's harshest environments, and it can help you too. Thank you for watching Survival Sensei HQ. Stay warm, stay safe, and I'll see you in the next video. Before you go, don't miss out on more essential survival wisdom. Hit that subscribe button now for a steady supply of survival secrets, ingenious hacks, and stories that could make all the difference when it counts. Every week we reveal strategies, tips, and real-world lessons that you won't find anywhere else. Whether you're preparing for the next storm, building a resilient home, or just love a good story of human ingenuity, this is your channel. Join the Survival Sensei HQ community. Subscribe now, ring the bell, and stay ahead of the storm. See you in the next adventure.